third panel, which was actually beautifully queued up for us by Stuart, who talked about how AI innovation is outpacing governance. And it's one of our most pertinent and time sensitive blind spots, right? And that's what we'll spend the next 30 minutes discussing. And let me introduce our esteemed panel. We've got Bala Reddy, who is the VP of AI at Geo, who builds and scales the multimodal foundation models that understand speech, video, and language at enterprise scale. We've got Stephen Pei, who is the executive director at Ascend and the Ascend Foundation, and he's the former CIO at Prudential International. And currently he teaches management and technology as executive in residence at NYU. And we have Pratul Patel, who is the CPO or the Chief Product Officer at CloudNuro, who builds the tooling that makes AI spend visible and governable. So let us begin today. And you guys know me, I'm Alice Stein. I'm the founder and principal of Stein and Partners. So let's begin with a very important question around where does governance break first as AI scales? And I want to bring this question to Pratul because he has, in fact, developed a tool for us to use that gives us increased visibility. And I'd like to have Pratul weigh in, and then I turn it over to Bala, who gives us the multimodal purview, and then to Stephen. Pratul, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, Alice. That's actually a very important and relevant question. The one that bites hardest is the access that nobody approved. A team wires an agent into a data source with a service account, let's say, and it works for now. And you got the autonomous thing reading production data that probably never went through an official review. So, and we have actually come across that scenario. I have talked to many of our customers, and one of our customers actually said that they discovered an agent that was hooked into their Oracle system, reading data from multiple different sources within Oracle and bringing it out and matching that data with whatever the agent is supposed to do. Well, very good. But next month they get a huge bill from Oracle, not necessarily from AI or the tokens in anything like that, but from Oracle, because that specific data that the agent was pulling was licensed per data input being tracked, and there were multiple agents pulling that data from that same source. So they never expected that to happen, that cost to increase, and it was a completely unknown source from which the cost went up. So in short, policy lag and invisible spend are real, but they are slow bleeds. Unapproved agent access is the one that becomes a prominent incident at some point.
Thank you. It's very insightful. And Bala, what about your world? Tell us a little bit about that. When AI scales, where does it break typically related to governance?
So for me, invisible spend becomes a real problem when AI starts to scale. With a simple chatbot, it is relatively easy to understand the cost, right? But with AI agent, one user request may create many model calls. The agent may plan, retrieve information, call tools, check the results, and the call model again, right? So the user sees one task, but behind the task, there are many model interactions. This makes it difficult to understand where the cost is actually coming from. For me, the important thing is visibility. I want to know which application or agent is consuming the tokens. I want to know which model is using it. I want to know how much context and reasoning it is using. And most importantly, I want to know whether that spend is producing a successful business outcome. Once we have that visibility, we can put budget and policies around it. So at enterprise scale, we should not only measure the cost per token, we should understand the cost of completing the business task.
Steven, what do you think?
Yeah, I think both Pratul and Bala gave some great answers. When I think about what Pratul said, a lot of where it breaks is around some of these autonomous, agents that are running without full visibility. And I want to also bring the complement of that, which is, the humans, right? Humans, when they don't perceive governance as something that they can work with or create too much friction, you get this concept. We used to call it shadow IT. Now we have the concept of shadow AI, right? People are now building tools themselves quickly to get around the governance and deploying them. So that's where, this can break as well. And what Bala mentioned as well, I mean, I think it gets down to accountability. And ultimately, when you have a lot of these agents running and you have outrun costs, who's ultimately accountable, right? You have to have accountability owners for each of these systems that are being built and being operationalized. So I think both, shadow AI and accountability are two of the key concepts that I come across many times, whether it's for corporate customer, corporate firm, or even smaller organizations that are starting to dabble with AI.
And I know we've talked a lot about shadow AI throughout the different panels. And I think it's important to note too that, as executives that are running organizations, shadow AI also gives us a purview into unmet needs. It creates this opportunity. I understand it presents a lot of risk, but also, what is the operational unmet needs of our tech stack, right? Are we missing something? If people are using these shadow tools to help themselves to be more productive or more efficient, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here because again, shadow AI has gotten a very bad reputation across all the panels, and I agree wholeheartedly as a responsible AI advocate. But we should also say that there is benefit there because it gives us insight into what are the unmet needs for that tech stack that we're not delivering on.
Right. And Alice, I just want to add, you're absolutely right. It gives us indication of some unmet needs, but it also gives us an indication of probably governance that's not set up correctly, right?
Yes.
Because people are trying to get around that governance because they feel that governance is impeding them. So I think it also gives us a view into, what could be better in terms of the governance structure that's being set up.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Also, when we talk about guardrails and setting them up, I mean, one of the biggest misconceptions is that it will slow down everything, right? What has been your experience with this?
Yeah, I could definitely go first. I mean, one of the things I want to set straight is I think guardrails are good, but they have to be designed well, right? So that's the misconception. I think well-designed guardrails don't slow things down. It actually maintains and sustains speed for the organization. So really, where we fail in organizations is not too much governance or too little governance. Do we have the right well-designed guardrails? Because if it's a governance where there's a manual gate, right, instead of a built-in guardrail into the system itself, yes, then things will slow down. This reminds me of the times where, in large organizations, you have architecture boards, right? And when you want to bring in new vendors or new platforms, or you want to design something new, you have to go through a EARB, Enterprise Architecture Board. And generally, that process in the past has been very manual. Like it requires people to actually go through it. And of course, it requires people's time, energy, scheduling. You might not even get an approval or any kind of answer for weeks. So that to me is a gate, and people try to get around those gates. And that's where like shadow IT comes in. But a guardrail, if it's actually built into the system, and we could talk more about that later, into the environment, it's actually invisible. It'll never get activated as long as certain edge cases are not triggered. So I do think a well-designed guardrail is actually something that is helpful for the organization, both managing risk and those edge cases while allowing for speed. So again, and the problems why things do slow down, in my opinion, from what I've seen, is a lot of times you apply the same kind of governance for everything. And we've talked about making sure that you have a risk-based approach to the governance, right? Small requests that are low risk should just go through. And then high exposure wins should definitely have the reviews and the guardrails in place. In addition, if something, doesn't work and it pops up saying, this is something doesn't work and pops up and says, we have to stop you, that's when people really are, concerned about the guardrails. So communication about what the guardrails are, making sure people know they're running, but they're invisible, but they will protect us is actually a very important step. And then finally, the ownership, right? When things do get stopped by a guardrail, people are unsure what to do. So you're making sure that there is a right escalation path and ownership of those guardrails, and rechecking the guardrails to see if it doesn't continue to make sense for the business is going to be important. So those are some of the things that I come across in my practice, why people think guardrails are bad and why they slow things down. But when designed right, the correct way, they actually are very helpful and they could sustain the speed that we're all facing, right? All of our executives want us to move faster.
Yeah, thank you for that. And you also called out something very important, which is, there should be tiers. There should be risk-based tiers. There's not this carte blanche guardrail and then no one gets in, then you're blocked, right? But there is a risk-based tier. And Bala, what's been your experience? I mean, you're operating such interesting technologies.
I agree. I think the level of control should depend on the level of the risk. For low risk activities, should allow them and log them, right? This gives us visibility without slowing down the user. But as the risk increases, we can add more controls. For example, we can add limits on the data access, modal access, tool usage, and spend. For high risk actions, we can require human approval. And there are a few things that should simply be blocked, especially when they involve sensitive data, unauthorized access, or actions outside the agent's permissions. The important thing is that these controls should be built into the platform. Then the platform can apply the right level of controls based on the risk. So the governance does not only allow or block, it can be different levels of control for different levels of risks.
Very good. And Pratul, I mean, you and the team have designed really really a tool that helps people manage their cost risk, right? In essence, really help reduce any kind of token waste. So could you talk to me more about some of the thinking around that? I think that's really, I mean, people don't always think that governance should include risk management related to cost, right? Cost controls, but it really does, right? It's a very nuanced topic. So can you talk a little more about the thinking that went into when you were developing CloudNuro?
Yeah, absolutely. So what Steve alluded to is a balance, right? And what Bala was saying is visibility. So a balance is definitely required. Friction comes from treating everything as high risk, which is what Steve said. So a balance is required, and that visibility is required. And one point that I would like to bring up is that yes, nobody likes governance because it tends, at least in the minds of people, in the short run, it brings a feeling that we are being slowed down. But think about it: an agent, an autonomous or a free agent goes and does something, and then later there is a millions of dollar lawsuit against the company. So where that's where we draw the line. That's where the we talk about the balance. And yeah, so we have designed the tools, and we exactly let monitor. We do different types of monitor, which I'll be talking about later in a demo that I'll be doing. But yes, we have the capability to bring the visibility both from a passive perspective as well as actively and real-time monitoring perspective, and the capability to implement the policies and put the guardrails and implement those guardrails and watch them real-time how they are acting and what benefit and what's being blocked, what benefit it brings in terms of tokens, dollars, all of that.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And then we just got an interesting question from the audience that talks about what controls can organizations implement quickly to monitor, detect, and mitigate model and data drift? I mean, we all know that data drift could really, really cause a lot of problems. Who wants to tackle this one? Bala, would you like to chime in on this one?
Yeah, I'll try to guess a little bit about this. See, one of the problems which happens in any of the machine learnings or any of the AI models is the drift in the data. And because of that, we always see some of the results going down. So one of the things which we always try to do is that we try to compare the new incoming data. We try to create the probability distributions of that. It may look a little bit math over here. We try to compare with the existing data and see where is the drift in the, we call this as covariate shift. And we try to understand this covariate shift and if possible, try to correct some of the few parameters so that it starts doing better. But if the drift goes a little bit beyond a certain limit, then we may have to some kind of fine tuning, retraining. We have to do a lot of mitigations around that.
And you have a team that focuses exclusively on this. They're doing this. I mean,
Yes,
monitoring is one of the areas that's overlooked quite a bit when we deal with governance. I mean, is that something that you proactively address with your team?
Yes, there are two things, not just the monitoring the drift, but also the hallucination is another thing, as the models are changing, we don't know what's happening, right? So we may call one version of it, you get some results, another version of it, you get some other results. So we try to standardize the data as much as possible to understand the drift of the model as well as the data. So we have to do both the things.
And
Yeah,
Stephen,
and
what's
now,
been your experience? Go ahead.
yeah, Alice, I think Bala gave a great answer there. And if I can just add a couple of additional things. You talked about measurements, and if I tie back measuring, what you need to measure for risk controls, and I tie it back to the governance and the guardrails, right? You need to also make sure you measure things like, time to approval, percent of requests that are auto cleared, what actually goes through without hitting the guardrails, what actually hits the guardrails, and if the guardrails are hit, what is the process and how long does it take for your request to go back and approved if the guardrails are hit? So those, kind of operational, right, modeling and work around AI also needs to be tracked and measured. Otherwise, people will continue to think about the guardrails and the governance we just talked about as blockers, right? And I'm going to say something that's a little bit counterintuitive, but the right guardrails are the paths of least resistance. Think about that. If you have the right guardrails designed, it's actually the least resistant path, right? If you make the guardrail path the hardest one to go through, people will constantly try to figure out how to get around it. And that's how the concept of shadow IT comes in. But if you make the guardrails the least resistant path, people will follow it. And then the second thing around measurement, I think it's really important. You mentioned cost, but I want to talk a little bit about the cost and the tokenomics. There are things that I know CloudNuro and the product does, and they've done a great job of monitoring costs. But there are practical things that people have to do when they do prompts, right? Because we all know that input tokens cost a lot less than output tokens in general, right? And then making sure that you limit the output and the context that comes out, right? So that it just doesn't become a free-flowing format is very important in terms of, cost controls around token economics, using the right models for whatever complex task, but also caching is very important, right? And people don't know, some people are familiar with caching, some people are not. How do you cache properly so that you don't go back and you just read the cache as opposed to processing the inputs all over again? So the architecture of how you actually build the input and the output is very important.
Thank you for that. That's really helpful responses. A question came across from the audience, and it looks like the question is around legislation. As you guys are familiar, we have, the EU AI Act, which is probably one of the first to market in legislation, and a lot of other countries were following their lead. Singapore has been operating on their own, sort of the front runner of implementing a lot of guardrails within their country. There's other obviously examples of that. The US tends to be right now more of a mosaic model where the specific legislation is quite fragmented. So the question specifically is around what would be an appropriate use case for AI in helping organizations navigate the fragmented rollout of legislation and regulation across different jurisdictions? I mean, how do you advise your clients? I mean, this is really a question coming down the line, right? I mean, how do you help people navigate? I mean, it's a moving target in the US, with the exception of frontier models. We've gotten some directions around those, but in Europe, there's some directives. But I mean, in this moving landscape, what is your advice as CIOs and CTOs? Pratul, what do you think? You live in this world every day.
Yes, and we have to understand that this is a very premature state we are in right now. I would like to compare the stage that we are in is maybe about 10 to 15 years back when cloud came into the picture, and cloud was evolving, and that's when FinOps was born to take care of. So we are in a similar stage of inflection where AI is now coming up. People, governments, everyone is trying to bring policies, put governance, put security around it, but nobody has it. I've talked with many of our existing customers, and for months they have been building their AI policies, and it's taking so much time because there's no clarity, there's no proper visibility. So there's a lot of chaos, and people want to take their time in getting it right rather than move fast is the approach many of the customers I have talked to, they are taking. But yeah, that's what I would like to say, that we are in a state, we are in an industry that is evolving and evolving very fast. And the best I would say is to keep an eye on it and be vigilant about it, and use it, because it definitely has a use. That's why people are using it. It is bringing value to them. So continue to do that, bring the visibility, bring in something that helps put the appropriate guardrails. I mean, yeah, Steve, you have been an ex-CIO. You can probably.
Yeah, I mean, I will give a very quick but somewhat of a funny answer, but I try to hire really good people that actually monitor the space or work with really good lawyers and people that understand both technology and law. But to your question, Alice, where can AI itself help us in terms of this evolving space, like Pratul's mentioned? Like, it's still evolving. I would say go from kind of annual or quarterly checks on legislation that's happening in the world, but also not just go from there to like continuous checks, right? AI can give you continuous monitoring, right? But also look at both lawsuits and settlements, because I think it really gives you an idea where things are headed. So a lot of people think about laws, but you also have to think about cases that actually have come across and how they've been settled or provided a verdict. So besides hiring really good people and having good lawyers that understand technology and forefront of some of the emerging technology, use the AI itself, and there are products out there that continuously monitor the legislative space to give you, continuous information.
Yeah, that's a good point. So lawyer up, adopt the chaos, and probably the safest bet is to fall back on your corporate culture and your internal ethics, right? You know your North Star, you hire good people, and you make the right decisions that way. So we're about to wrap up, and I have just one final question for you guys. That is tied around, we're going to do sort of I would say a lightning round, if you will. So if a board asks you to name the single governance control that matters most before scaling agents, what's one idea? Bala, you want to give us your quick answer?
Well, maybe I can go first. One control that I would think is that would bring the maximum benefit would be routing and right sizing the models. So based on that, like Steve was talking about. Look at the prompts and the complexities. I've seen a lot of people use the highest model, for example, Opus 4.8 for very simple tasks, but they can be easily routed to lower models, saving 50, 100 times the cost.
Yeah. And I could go next. I come from, a lot of Wall Street firms, investment banks, and I go back to my early days of electronic trading. In all the exchanges, we have circuit breakers, right? When trading or volatility hits a certain level, we have circuit breakers that actually pause or stop trading for like an entire day, right? Or an afternoon. A really good question someone asked me is, where is the circuit breaker for our AI models? An executive or board member came to ask me about that. Like, where is the circuit breaker? How do you kill it? Where's the kill switch? Think about that. I thought about that question, right? How do you kill it, right? Do you take down a data center? No. So build in proper circuit breakers and kill switches is something that I think your board, your CEO would probably want to know how that's done.
Wonderful. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Bala, do you want to comment?
Yeah, for me, the most important, again, I'll come back to the same thing, coming back to the visibility is the most important thing. And we need to have visibility at which application, which agent, which workflow. This is at a very, very high level. Yeah.
And the board will appreciate that focus on visibility and giving them transparency into their decision making as well. But it's been a pleasure chatting with you all. Thank you so much, Bala, Steven, Pratul. I'm going to wrap up the panel and we're going to go into the fourth panel where we talk about moving from pilot to adoption. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alice and Steve and Bala.